this season for you guys?
We're ways out from that. You know, you just as we get started, you just want them all to continue to improve and get better and keep the competition really alive. And so, you know, they're all kind of at different stages. I would just say this, like, I think you saw Caleb improve a lot because it was his second year in the defense. And that comfortability and, you know, being able to be aggressive, make plays, all that stuff. So, you know, when you look at Jordan, when you look at Tate, when you look at Keyshawn, when you look at Martell, guys that have played quite a bit and now it's their second, you know, Tate's third year in the defense, you expect them to, when they're comfortable, they play faster. When they play faster, they make more plays.
Yeah, and I was actually at the practice when Tate got hurt. I was like right there when the injury happened. I was like, well, it's a pretty serious injury. Obviously, he's recovered from that. Just how much has Tate gotten better since that injury? What have you seen from him so far since then?
Yeah, it's just, you know, for Tate, if when Tate's healthy and he's on the field, he's one of the better players in the group. So, you know, he's been very mindful. I know done some new things with our new nutrition staff that I think have really helped this offseason. Had a good program with Coach Joe, so, you know, excited to see him get out there and just, you know, best ability is availability. So just keeping him out there on the field.
What excites you just about the continuity as a whole within your team?
Just the competition. You know what I mean? It's definitely, as a coach, when you get into having guys for multiple years, just kind of like with Caleb, you can start to add layers to things. You can see their confidence in things. And we played and practiced so much last year that by the end of the year, you could see, like, it's interesting. For us, like, the last let's call it 6 weeks watching film of us, like, if you just watch it in order, you can see how much better guys started to play, the more confidence they had. So really, I've challenged the guys that, listen, not that on day one we're going to, you know, be as comfortable and play as well as we did in the last regular season game or last game of the year, but certainly expect those guys to really have made big improvements and those to show up really quickly during the spring.
What's kind of that reflection period look like the past 2 months or so within your linebacker group and kind of moving forward?
That's a good, you know, again, it's individual, it's as a group. You see the things that we did well. I think always as a coach, when you see things that as a group they didn't do well, you got to look and reflect at yourself and what you're coaching. Is it the best thing? Can they do it? Do you need to teach it differently? Whatever else it is. So that's been a big piece, is what things can we add on these guys' plate? What do we feel like after knowing these guys for a full year, 2 years, 3 years? Like, who are they? What do they do well? How can we put them in those situations? And then how do we need to either enhance something we're doing and do it more, or maybe go, okay, we got to teach this concept differently because the guys aren't, for whatever reason, they're not executing, if that makes sense.
Last year, Coach Gilliam called you guys most improved units in the whole team. What's the next step for you guys this season?
I try not to get too far. I always appreciate that type of compliment. You know, I'm really just focusing on the spring and being, I would say, if you gave me a goal, let's be the most improved group coming out of the spring. Obviously want to be healthy, want to see the development, you know what I mean? Because there's still some key pieces that guys individually need to get better at. And I told them, I said, you guys need to make my job hard. Let's look at this thing and say there's 5, 6, 7 guys that could go out and potentially start for us, you know. And then there's always the thing you don't talk about is we need as many guys contributing on special teams as well. So, you know, for us, I think we play a big part in the defense from a schematic standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, and we need to continue to raise our bar as Coach Dillingham and Coach Ward are challenging us to do so.
And what newcomers should we look out for this year? Obviously, we got Zyrus, Jordan, Sean, and Tate, but what newcomers have stood out to you so far?
Oh, well, Isaiah Iosefa right now he's a true freshman. It's early enrolled. You know, I think he's got a pretty bright future. You know, if I'm going to compare him to Martell, athletically they're different. Isaiah is probably farther ahead mentally. Now, Isaiah also was a high school linebacker. Martell converted from safety. So really excited to get Isaiah out there, get him rolling. And, you know, he comes from great bloodlines, you know, with older brothers playing a lot of college football. So we're really excited. I'm glad he's here. Really excited to get him going.
I know last year Martell did pretty well in special teams, but do you see some more role of him on defense this year?
Yeah, he played quite a bit. I mean, he was our third down Mike linebacker, and so really the challenge for Martell is to become comfortable in all base downs because he's certainly got the ability to do so. And another young guy too is Prayer. I think Prayer's got a chance to really contribute for us as well.
Keyshawn's been known to be a workhorse, wake up early. What have you seen out of him in the past few months?
The same. You know what I mean? The same. You know, if they've got a 7 a.m. workout, he's probably here at 5:30. You know, that's just his personality. I think he's done a really good job of balancing himself off the field. You know, that was something that I think at the back end of the year he played really well against Texas, and a couple late games just kind of found some balance in for him. And so we're really going to lean into that. I think he's being a little bit more vocal as a leader, and that's starting to show up in the weight room and on the field when they're running out there. So just excited for him to continue to progress and put all that together.
Evaluating kind of the improvements that guys like Marcel Hughes and Jordan Cook made the middle tail end of last season, what kind of excites you sort of evaluating?
Just the challenge for me as a coach to continue that, right? Like both are very talented in their own ways, and can be, I'll stop at saying game changers, but explosive guys that can really flash and show up on film. So it's just to keep their learning, keep their hunger, their fire, all those things, continue to move them in the right direction, which I've been pretty pleased with so far.
You guys have taken upon yourselves to have that learning contract. How do you think that sort of helped the guys grow just as a unit?
I think, just as the year went on, they really, like anything else, like you can either make them have it or, kind of let it become its own thing. And it really, with those guys, I think it's become their own thing where they do a good job off the field, staying out of trouble, doing a great job in the classroom. And then once we hit that field, we bring a different energy and excitement, and they embrace it. But, like, it really starts to recruit. Like, we talk about it in recruiting. And so as we recruit those guys, now they're starting to come in the fold already, understanding what that means and the expectation to live up to that, if that makes sense.
So that's something that you're recruiting to as well, finding guys.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You got to have guys that can kind of know when to turn it on and off, if that makes sense. And that when we're on the field, man, turn it on, cut it loose, be your personality, be who you are. That's ultimately what it means.
And then Zyrus kind of being a veteran within the unit, how do you think he's kind of spearheaded that?
Yeah, I would say, Zyrus, like if you look at our room, Zyrus and Crook are the two spark plugs. Those guys have a different energy on the field, just in life in general, but especially on the field. So those guys, I would say, are the two, when it comes to leading that type of energy and enthusiasm and passion at practice or game days, whatever else, those two probably set the bar for our room at least.
And then what's kind of the message for the 2 months that have gone by now moving into spring ball into the next season? What is your message to these people?
Well, it started with Coach Dillingham at the top as far as how to handle success, you know what I mean? And then we've really hammered home on hey, let's take from the lessons and things we learned, but understand the past has no indication on how we're going to do in the future. And whether it's us as coaches or the players, and everybody walks around and said, hey, you had a great year and all this stuff, like none of that stuff matters anymore. And I don't think a lot of people realize while we had a really good year, the taste that was left in our mouth after that last game was one that I think that's made this group and, the defense, I think the team pretty hungry, if that makes sense. So certainly appreciative of all the things that did happen, but we're focused on growing and getting better and being a better version of ourselves this spring and then into the fall.
You mentioned success and some of the lessons learned through success. What are some of the big keys and big takers from last year that you tried to emphasize?
Well, I think those guys realize it's trusting the process. You know what I mean? Kind of, no offense, guys, but blocking out the media or social media or their families or all the people that aren't in their, let's say, football lives day to day, and really just focusing on the process and trusting, not focusing on the results, but the process. And when you do a good job at the process, most of the time the results will come. So it was affirming for me. For me personally, I've been a part of winning 3 national titles. So I've also been a part of, you get into an off season, you've got to stamp out complacency. And you got to hunt for it, you got to smell it out, and you got to look for it at every turn. There's been a couple times this off season where we kind of had some discussions about it, but for the most part, I think the guys have been pretty focused on the future and the process and not what happened in the past. I think we did some good things. I'm pretty hard on them, so there's always things you'd like to see them do better, and that's what we've really focused on in January and February and watching film. And the nice part is when you watch the tape, it's probably consistently. There's some guys that have individual things that they need to improve on, but I think as a group, there's some main points that we all need to get better at, if that makes sense. And so it's just a challenge for them and the rest of the defense to all raise our level as one, if that makes sense. It's like at linebackers, it's always your run fits. It's number one for us, it's your footwork, it's your block destruction, it's your fits, it's your eyes. For us, I will say one thing that they got a lot better at towards the end of the year was our pass drops, especially in our zones, getting our feet in the ground. And we continue to challenge them to be more disruptive. I believe we had 4 or 5 interceptions last year. You got to be careful when you do that as a coach, because I don't want them to go hunt for those things. If they do their job and trust the process, they come. But I think there's more areas we can improve, and I think we've got to become better blitzers. In the run game we were pretty disruptive, but I think our group needs to be more disruptive when we're blitzing in pass situations. You know, what you always want, I guess the easiest way to say it, and Caleb McCullough did it last year, you want your seniors to have their best year. And that's not necessarily when you say that, right away guys think, hey, I got to go make 100 tackles and do all this. You want them to have their best year on the practice field, their best year in the weight room, the best year academically, and be most consistent in all those areas, because if they do that, then it will translate to the field. So that's really my challenge for all those guys is whatever you've done in the past, let's be the better version of yourself moving forward, and then that'll take care of the success and the tackles, the TFLs, all that stuff that occur on the field. Yeah, I mean, Caleb had a great year, really did a great job leading the group, and you know, that's a beautiful part about our group. There's a ton of competition, and it's kind of like when an injury occurs, they understand it's really the next guy up. So while we love Caleb, we miss Caleb, we're wishing him the best as he gets ready for pro day. Like for us, it wasn't like we were slowing down. It's like, okay, the next guy's got to be ready to grow, and Prayer and Martell and Crew and Tate and all those guys that maybe didn't play quite as much as the other guys, hey, you guys got to step up and keep it pushing. And we got 2 freshmen that'll get here in June, and those guys are going to have an opportunity to compete as well. So I don't mean it to sound cold. When you lose a guy, you always miss that guy. But if you're looking back and missing that guy, you're kind of missing really what's in front of you, if that makes sense.
Do you think with Caleb going through all the lows he did and then seeing the highs and taking that next guy up, as you said, do you think that sort of pedigree that he had sort of helped the other guys in the league?
Yeah, there's no question, because it was like, they're a pretty unselfish, humble group as it was. But if there anything was, and there was a couple times I mentioned, I'm like, look what this guy's been through. You know what I mean? Through the highs and lows, staff changes, all just the adversity, right? And hasn't wavered on wanting to be here and how he works, and the things we get to see are his energy and how he comes in the building every day. So I think he just set a really good example for those guys of like, hey, if you don't like where you're at in the depth chart, if you don't like something, hey, put your head down and go to work. And if you do that long enough, good things will happen for you.
Coach, speaking of going to work, I mean, asking the other coaches, I mean, last year, obviously teams are prepared for you. Pick to finish last or not. In a competitive sport, they're going to prepare for you, but maybe kind of being overlooked. But now this year coming in with, obviously, Big 12 champs is a new season. How have you seen maybe the excitement around the team and the growth of knowing that now you have the target on your back?
You know, again, I was telling them earlier, Coach Dillingham really challenged the team and the coaches to handle success. So it's more about, I think, your attention to detail and your process has to be even better, because what we all know when we do finally get there in the fall is that you're going to have a target on your back. And you can't worry about that target. You just have to focus on being a better version of yourself as a football team. And as that trickles on down to the defense, special teams, offense, whatever it is. So I think for us, it's just really what I see is just a little bit more maturity in certain areas. Guys a little bit more willing to call each other out on things. I think when the coaches do address things, there's probably a little bit more receptiveness because of maybe the maturity. Now we've got to continue to move that forward. And I think, but Coach Dillingham's done a good job really addressing that and challenging the guys to do that.
Well, with your group too. I mean, last year you told me up at Camp T, the first thing you did was make them comfortable being very uncomfortable. And the growth that we saw from them, no matter, like you said, no matter who's out there, they were all performing.
Yep.
With that said, now coming into spring ball now, not really. I know you talked about the growth not being in question, but how do you feel that your group has helped? Is going to help the rest of the defense grow from the beginning.
Yeah, I would just, like I challenge those guys a lot. Pretty much in everything they do, I challenge them to be the standard of whatever Coach Dillingham or Coach Ward is asking us to do in this program. It doesn't mean we're perfect at it. It doesn't mean we always hit that, but I want them to know in the sense that if you're going to be the standard or something, that means your teammates and the coaches are looking at you on how you do things, what your process is, and how you respond both to good and bad situations, if that makes sense. So I think they've done a good job with it, you know what I mean? And there's been a couple times where I've actually found stuff that maybe wasn't a big deal, but I intentionally kind of twisted it just to keep them on their toes, but they also understand me as I'm going to keep them on their toes. And what I think and I appreciate about the group right now is they're challenging themselves to do that. You know what I mean? And there's enough when you watch us play defense. Like, it's not like we were the 85 Bears last year either. We gave up some points to Kansas and some points to Central Florida. And you know what I mean? Like, there's some games, Texas Tech, you look at, we didn't play real well on defense. And so those have been, like, what's cool about our guys, I thought we got better and better. It's one of the few teams I've been around that every week our guys kept getting better and better and better. And so far, really what we're challenging the guys right now is take from the scars and the mistakes we've learned, and let's grow from those as we move forward. Does that make sense?
speaking of that, like getting better now that I've had time to digest it, when you go back and you see the Peach Bowl film, I mean, again, the defense just kept chugging away, but you're kind of, I know as being a coach and being tough on it, but you're great at that, like how that last performance we saw.
There's a lot of really, really great stuff, and there's some really bad stuff. It's a football game, put it like that. And it's the type of game that, as we saw, one or two plays differently. So we really challenged the guys on defense, because I know a couple guys really took it, they all took it hard, but really, it felt like they had let the team down with some things, and it's like, listen, we're going to grow and learn from it. We're not going to point fingers. We're not going to blame. You know what I mean? Like, it was a team loss, and I'll say it sucked. It still sucks, but you've also got to be able to move forward. There was probably a week or two, and we hit the road recruiting that I'm wallowing in it. That every plane flight I'm on, I'm watching and thinking about it. But to grow, you've got to be able to move forward. You know what I mean? And that's what they've done a pretty good job is, the teams I've been around that can take a loss like that and use it as motivation and use those lessons to help build you and grow you, you can do some really special things. And, when I was at North Dakota State in 2010, we lost in the quarters, got knocked out by actually Bo Baldwin's Eastern Washington team. And coulda, woulda, shoulda, had an opportunity to win the game. We didn't. We had a real young team that learned from those mistakes, and then we rattled off 3 straight national titles. And you know what I mean? So I was explaining to the guys, if you take the lessons and the things that learned and the things that really suck and hurt right now, and you remember those, that can be a good extra motivation factor that, let's call it what it is, some other teams don't have or won't have right now.
You talked about the continuity within your unit, but just the coaching staff as a whole and kind of having that continuity there as well. How do you think that helps keep that message out?
Oh, I think it's huge because everybody, I had a coach tell me one time it usually takes a staff a year to figure out how to work together. You know what I mean? Generally, when a staff comes together, they come from different places, different ideologies. It's understanding and buying into what your head coach wants. And then when you have an offseason like us where we didn't lose any full-time coaches, well, now we have, I think, a better understanding of what Coach Dillingham expects and wants out of us and out of the players, if that makes sense. And again, you don't leave anything to assumption, but at the same time, when you have that, so then you maybe have to spend less time going over those things, and we can go on more time progressing and growing and building. And I think it also allows us to keep our ears open and be more receptive to, when I sit down and talk to Coach Sanga about the run game and things that he knows and they do, and then I can correlate it to what we do defensively. You're more open to share things and talk about things and kind of learn from each other, if that makes sense. Plus, we're lucky. It's a bunch of really good dudes. Like, I've been on a bunch of staffs, and I've been on staffs where you didn't like people on the staff, you flat out hated people on the staff. Like, we have a staff of guys that really wants to be here and they get along and enjoy each other. You know what I mean? And like you guys, when you enjoy going to work, it makes it a little bit easier. It's a little funner. You know what I mean? A lot, and so I'll hit you with the coach speak. We're just going to have a great spring. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always careful about, especially when you get into stats and accolades, like setting those things, because he could have a really good year and not hit some of those things, and does that mean it's a failure? You know what I mean? And for us on defense and what Coach Ward and Coach Dillingham want to play with 11 men on the field that are playing together and as one, you just got to be careful about saying, hey, we want him to be this or that. I think when you look at the things he needs to get better at, if we accomplish those, then I think you'll see even more individual and hopefully group success out there, if that makes sense.
You said he saw a lot of players for the past 12 months or so. What did you see from him?
He's like a different guy. And people got to remember, like, we signed Prayer out of high school, and he was a 3-4 outside backer who rushed most of the time. And his tape was really good. And it's funny, Coach Ward and I were just talking about it. If Prayer had maybe been in a bigger metropolitan area, he might not have walked on here. He probably would have had quite a few more offers. So really just his comfortability in being back off the ball, in his eyes, his vision, the way he studies. Real big credit to Coach Conley, man, because he's really helped boost his confidence. Prayer's had a really good fall and a really good offseason just conditioning-wise. Like, he is one of the more explosive, faster guys in the group. Now, that's now got to translate to the football piece, right? But you've just seen him grow and mature, and I'm excited. It's a big spring for him, so I'm really excited for him.
You mentioned Coach Conley. How big specifically to your linebacker group has he been?
Oh, huge, because he knows he can push those guys, just kind of like we talked before, that he can push those guys to set the standards and things, and that they're such a good group in handling critique, criticism, and coaching that if they don't hit it, that he can call those guys out in front of everybody and they can handle it. Does that make sense? So, and so he's done a really good job. And then individually, him and I had a real good talk in early January, individually on where we felt, not just through spring, but all the way into the fall, physically, where each guy needed to go to be a better version of themselves. So, yeah, he does a great job with those guys. Really good job with those guys. Yeah, I think just focusing on getting the guys to understand and focus on it was a process, and that we didn't talk one time last year about winning the championship. Didn't talk about it at all. Even when we got the Big 12 title game, it's like, duh, we already know what game this is, right? So, again, focusing on the process. Focusing on, today we went out and walked through. Hey, the process now after the walkthrough is go hydrate, go get your nutrition in, and then go lift. And then the process after that and treatment. And just focus on the small daily process and focusing on being 1% to 2% better in what we're asking them to do. Where Coach Dillingham's really challenged us is if we're going to ask them to get better at those things, then we can't stay stagnant as coaches as well. We've got to make that same type of improvement. Very, very similar. I worked for Coach Ball, Craig Ball, for 13 years, 14 years. It was the same way. We didn't talk about winning championships when we were at the FCS level. We didn't talk about winning bowl games when we were at Wyoming. It was all about the process, the daily grind. You know what I mean? Make sure we praise guys when they did things well, correct things when they didn't, if that makes sense. But very kind of staying in the moment. No different than when in the middle of the game and not looking up at a scoreboard, whether you're up 20 or down 20, and just getting the guys to really tunnel in and focus on what we're doing that day. And so very similar for me. You know what I mean? That way going in this offseason, I met with the guys early on, nothing to do with X's and O's and everything, understanding, okay, this is how you want to have success again. Well, you got to understand that we got to rebuild the foundation of what we do and who we are. We can't assume anything on the way, because I've made that mistake, and you start assuming, he knows this, or he knows this is what we do, instead of coaching and expecting him to do it. Then you're going to have cracks in your foundation, and those cracks don't usually show up until the season.